For anybody that tunes in right before the show, it's the same thing every week. Me talking to myself about closing windows. I have to make people feel at home.
This is the Citadel Cafe.
This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 79, recorded live on Tuesday this week, September 10th, 2013. I am Joel Duggan, and Peyton was not able to make the special show time, but I have with me, returning for another episode, Mr. Joel Cain. How's it going, man?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Very well, sir. Very well. It has been a busy week, but busy is good. Keeps the roof over one's head, all that kind of stuff.
Indeed.
And we are not alone. Matt Britton is also joining us. Matt is another friend that I met at Nerdtacular. Joel, and Matt at the same time, as a matter of fact. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And we are going to dive into your expertise in just a minute. But if you happen to be new to the Citadel Cafe, then this is where myself and a couple of friends come to hang out and talk about the stuff that we're into. It can be geeky, it can be sci-fi, fantasy. We're not myopic, though. If it's a book, website, television show, movie, we'll let you know what we think. If we think it's great, we will just stand on a soapbox and let you know. And if we think it's crap, we're going to let you know that, too. And it's going to be an interesting show because the tech world was all abuzz this afternoon. So we might as well just jump right in because I know this is going to be a bit of a conversation, given the occupation of one Matt Britton. So, around the table, everybody's got a smartphone, yes?
Correct.
Okay.
I have two.
You do two. Wow. Fancy.
Yeah.
Fancy. I am an iPhone user. I have an iPhone 4, and my contract is just up. There are 3-year contracts here in Canada. So I start off on the 4 and I end on the in between with the 5S, which was just newly announced today. So Apple had a big press conference, and well, I shouldn't say big. They had a small press conference that was very iOS and iPhone focused. And they released 2 new phones as well as gave a date for the new iOS coming out for iPad and iPhone, which is September 18th. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts. I mean, if you want to know a lot about the guts and the news, I mean, just go to the Apple site, go to twit.tv or something. It's everywhere on the internet. You can't miss, people reporting about the latest from Apple today. But what I wanted to talk to you guys about is that, Joel, I know you're an Android user.
That's right.
And Matt, where do you land?
Android.
Okay. I was kind of hoping for a Windows phone just to kind of get the third player in there.
I have had a Windows phone. It was the first phone they gave me when I went to work for Verizon. So I have had one and used one. Very quickly got away from it. But.
Right. So cats out of the bag. You work in an industry that deals heavily with smartphones.
Yes, this is my job. So I mean, it was a big deal for us at work. Not everybody cares so much because. I mean, we are sales. We're not, the tech part. But being a tech guy myself, like this, Samsung had theirs on the 4th, and then today was Apple, and just to see them do their thing and bring a whole new. I mean, both of them big game changers this time around, and I think that it was really exciting for anybody who's really techie and anybody who enjoys their smartphone and their mobile devices. Period.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're really kind of going at each other blow for blow. I mean, it's the iPhone 5S and it's the Samsung S5.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
that's not engineered to confuse consumers at all.
No, and when you look at them, they look. I mean, one looks very Apple and one looks very Samsung, but they don't. Like other than that, like it looks like they took the same block and then each of them shaped it.
Yeah.
To look like a third person's idea of what a phone should look like.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Twit coverage this afternoon for my lunch break, it was nice that it was only an hour. I mean, it's a nice treat to sit down, in the fall on any given Tuesday that Apple is doing this stuff, and there's usually like a 2-hour press conference, and there's all these examples and details shown. Sometimes Apple streams it live. They did today, but they were only streaming it in like Britain, Germany, and China or something.
Yeah, yeah. I
S-
really hated that we couldn't actually watch it live. I had to watch the live blog. So
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have an Apple TV, it's up on the Apple TV now, or of course you can access it via their website. And it's
yeah,
only an hour, which is it's very concise, and like I said, it's very iPhone, iOS focused. I mean, they do the whole, him and haw with their numbers and their sales and stuff like that. And when iOS 7 is released later next week, I think it's a week from tomorrow. It's going to go out to 700 million iOS devices, which I thought was pretty impressive. But I mean, correct me here, Matt. That's not more than Android. Like Android is on a lot more like in a lot more hands, right?
yeah. I mean, this past year, Samsung outsold Apple
Right,
hands down. Just Samsung.
right,
So and Motorola has done decent. And then there are other. I mean, there are other ones out there that are selling better in one market or another.
right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, Samsung themselves outsold the iPhone. So I feel like there's a lot more Android devices out there. But what I found interesting is that when they talked about the rollout of iOS 7, and they say, "Oh yeah, well we're going to roll it out to 700 million devices," but they didn't exactly come out and say, "Oh, this is going to work fantastic on your iPhone 4." They said this is designed for an iPhone 5C, and they spent a lot of time talking about how iOS 7 and the iPhone 5C were designed to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the feeling that if you don't have a 5C or a 5S, this is not going to benefit you like you think it is.
Yeah, I do know that some of the operating system features are stripped down for iPhone 4 and say like an iPad 2.
Hmm.
Like the Gaussian blur effect when you're doing certain application changing and surfing and that kind of thing, and I'm fine with that. I don't need it to be, super shiny, pretty. I just need it to function at a pace that allows me to continue to use my phone as I do now.
Hmm.
Which, I mean, it's not lightning fast. And Jocelyn, my girlfriend, has an iPhone 5 that's brand new from January. For her, I mean, I know that came out last year, but it's brand new to her as far as being a 6 month old phone, and that's very fast compared to mine. So, I mean, I understand that there's a bit of concern, especially because I don't know. I mean, Apple made it available. I mean, the only devices that are excluded are anything that is not the brand new iPod Touch, anything below an iPhone 4, and anything. Well, it's the iPad 1. That's the only iPad version that's not included is the iPad 1. And really, if you've got an iPad 1, those things are slow. Like to use even my iPad 2 now and deal with somebody that has a 1, it's a huge difference. So I don't have a lot of concern for it being slow. I think some people are going to assume they're going to get the top of the end shiny iOS 7 with all the pretty visual features, all the aesthetic features, and they might be disappointed when they don't because they're using it on a 4 or they're using it on an iPad 2. But there's a certain amount of practicality to my Apple fanboydom. I prefer function over fashion.
Hmm.
So where do you land, Matt? Like what's your kind of overall takeaway from the announcements today?
I mean, I feel like in the mobile business, in the mobile market in general, each iteration is a great leap above the last one. In For the most part, I mean, Motorola had a spot there right before Google kind of took over that they were kind of releasing the same type of thing over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, you look at the because Samsung is really Apple's competitor right now, and you look at the way that they've done things. And the S3 was great, and it had some issues, but they kind of worked on those. And then they released the Note 2, which was this tablet version of a phone, and it was leaps and bounds above the S3. And then they released the S4, and it again is a good jump above above the Note 2 and the S3. And then, I mean, months later, they're like, "Oh, okay, Note 3," and I honestly watched that and expected them to say, "This is the tablet version of the S4 with pretty much all the same functions, bigger screen, and a few little changes." But they really came out and were like, "Oh yeah, all this stuff we've got ready for you," and just threw it on the board. And it was really exciting, and I liked watching theirs and felt like they really came to the game with this air of you're expecting a little bit, and we're going to give you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then Apple came to the table, and they stood up there, and I mean, the first thing he says is, uh, "We've developed the most, what do you say, the most forward-thinking device ever made." And that was the first statement he made, and then I'm like, okay, well, I already know what it's going to be because you've multiple times said that it's going to be the same basic phone
Mm-hmm.
that you had with the iPhone 5. So just how I feel like they come out and set the bar really high, and then struggle to keep up with what they come out with. And I think they came out with some good new technology, but nothing that that really came up to that wow feature that they seem to want
Yeah.
to bring
Yeah.
with
That's
it.
pretty
And I was a
typical
little
of Apple,
disappointed.
isn't it?
Yeah, the Apple PR machine has a way of saying like we invented the wheel, as everybody
Yeah.
in the world
Yeah.
kind of goes, no, you didn't, but we do really like your wheel. Like it's they it's funny how there's all this criticism that happens at the beginning, and by the end of it, even some of the chuckling pundits that are pulling their punches at the typical Apple machine as it marches through its press conference still have a lot of nice things to say at the end.
Yeah.
I think that I mean, like my takeaway was, I mean, my contract is up, but I don't know if I'm really going to upgrade right now. Like my hardware, since I've got an iPad, I don't use my phone for a whole lot. I use it for a lot of basic smartphone function. I don't do anything astronomically important. It's texting, some web surfing, mostly Twitter, social media, some note taking and pictures, and that's really kind of what my phone does. I've got lots of apps on my phone that I haven't opened in weeks, months even. I certainly don't play any games on it now that I have an iPad. So for me, check out this amazing video processor and capability in the phone. That's great, but I don't watch Netflix on my phone. I don't play, video games on my phone. I know a lot of people do, so it's just my kind of 2 cents. Because I mean, like I don't have a commute. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people on the bus or the train or the subway, use their phones for a lot of different things. But I feel like it's a solid move forward. I mean, the processing and all the guts that they made, obviously the technology has to march forward. But what really kind of what I took away from it today was a graph that they put up that showed like the processing speed slash, just capabilities of the phone. And it started with, the regular iPhone, and then the iPhone revision, and then like the 3G, the 3GS, and then the 4, and then the 5, and then the 5C and the 5S, and the curve just went almost vertical, with the last two iterations of the phone. And Jocelyn went from a 3G, I think a 3GS, to a 5. And the difference from one to the other for her was on that graph was like 10 times faster. Like it was not twice or 3 times as fast. It was several, leaps up the chart. And I mean, for me, from a 4 to a 5 or a 5S would be a huge, huge jump. I find it interesting that the 5 is not available anymore. It's the 5C. Like the 5S is the flagship, the 5C is something else entirely, which is a new thing for Apple. And then the 4, of course, is still available for free with contract.
The 4S.
4S,
right?
sorry, excuse
4S.
me. So I
Yeah.
mean, like the 4, the one in my pocket is now obsolete.
Yeah, and I told a lot of people, and I had a lot of people over the past, month or so say, well, what's going to happen when the new iPhone comes out? And I said, my honest opinion is we're going to see a 5 and a 5C, or we're going to see a 5S, a 5C, and then a 5, and then you're not going to see a 4 and a 4S. And Apple kind of was like, well, we're going to keep the 4S, but we're going to get rid of the 5, and then you're going to get the 5S and the 5C. And I think part of that too, to me, was like this: the 5 is great, but it had a lot of issues, and a lot of people didn't like it. Um, and then you have the 4S, which a lot of people did like, and so they kept the one that people liked, even though it's not as good,
Yeah, and
just
what?
because people liked it.
But what the thing is, like with the iPhone 5, it's still Apple's best year
Oh yeah.
of an iPhone. Like
Yeah,
it's even though people quote unquote didn't like it. It's like that. You get bad service at a restaurant, and 13 people are going to be complaining loudly, but you get exceptional service at a restaurant, and 3 people will be complimenting you loudly. Like
Yeah.
people tend to complain louder more often. And I don't
definitely.
know how much of a true, I guess, market sample that would be, given the numbers. I mean, Apple is not in the shitter.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
they're doing just fine, just fine. Joel, what did you think of the news today?
Well, like I said, typical Apple. They presented it as all the new shiny, but really, there's not much that's innovative. I mean, and not to downplay it, it's going to be a great phone. Um, the something we haven't mentioned yet is the fingerprint deal.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Although I'm not sure how that's really going to work out with the biometrics being so defeatable. The other thing was the 64-bit processor, which is cool, but it's still only got a gig of RAM, so it's not really, I mean,
And,
you'll see a little bit of a speed bump from that, but
and
Yeah.
it's only dual core. I mean,
yeah, it is only dual core.
my biggest complaint against all of the other competitors for Samsung is that you don't have a quad core processor, and Samsung has two. Like, they're not there, and they're releasing a dual core and trying to figure out how to make their octa core work in the U.S.
Yeah.
And here's Apple going, oh, 64-bit. Yeah, it's dual core, but it's 64-bit. And I remember how that was with the computer, and the take rate is never that hot.
No, no. I
No.
mean, like
So,
even with desktops, I mean, like the processor speed means less. I mean, what you need is a flash drive, like a solid
mhm.
state hard drive to speed up your system, and more RAM for the
And for
majority.
most users, yeah.
Yeah, for most, and I think that's the other thing that's really important to remember too is that, I mean, sure, I like tech stuff, I like tech news, I like to keep up on that kind of stuff because I find it very interesting, but as I mentioned earlier, my average use of the phone doesn't need octa-core. Like,
That's true.
like I don't need that kind of power to check Twitter. It really kind of where people land on average with their phone use, I think is in the middle or in the middle closer to the low end. I mean, like my mother has an iPhone. She's got a 4S. She loves it. She has a new iPad. So I think it's a 16 gig. So the latest model version 4, I think is the one that's currently out when she bought it earlier this summer. So I mean, like that's all she needs. And she uses it a lot. I mean, mom is tech savvy enough to email and check Facebook, and she's on Twitter and all this kind of stuff. So she's using it to the capacity of most people. She takes pictures and she likes to organize them, that sort of thing. I think I'm really curious to see where the 5C is going to do, sales wise, especially given the fact that it is not really aimed at North America. And that is, I mean, if it is, that's the phone you buy your 14-year-old.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
or it's, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say a lot of people on because we watched a few different streams when we were watching it today, and when I was watching the Twitch stream, a lot of people in the chat were saying like it was like, well, what does the C stand for in in 5C? And a lot of people originally had said, well, it's gonna mean there's a lot of color. And after we saw it, so many people were like, I think that C stands for children.
Yeah.
Like this is really the child's phone. Like
Yeah.
there's bright and shiny blue, there's yellow, and there's
Yeah.
pink, and the girls that I work with were like, oh, those are really cute, and the kids that saw them were like, oh, those are really cool. But I don't think a lot of people looked at it and said, oh yeah, that's what I want is a really colorful phone that
Yeah.
does exactly what the 5 does.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I'm getting a hot pink one.
Yeah, well, there's a pink Note 3, and I would not be unhappy if somebody gave me one for free.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It just the thing about the colors, I mean, for me, especially seeing as the event was streamed live in China, and Apple just kind of announced that they're launching for the first time in China, along with U.S., Canada, Germany, France, Britain, I think a couple of other places, and I feel like it's really aimed at the world market in terms of being a phone that is transferable or has the appeal for those kinds of markets. I mean, I really am thinking specifically of China and how a lot of Asian culture where internet is consumed on the phone, like people don't have computers as much.
yeah, and I don't know if they said it or not, but I know that a lot of people were asking whether they are going to be releasing on China Mobile, which is like the biggest mobile subscriber carrier in the world. Like there's like
Yeah,
I don't know how many millions, like millions of people who are subscribed to China Mobile.
I'm the last that I heard was no, but
Yeah, and that's what I was
they have
thinking.
a carrier in China.
Okay, but that's
It's
still
not the big
huge
one.
for them.
Yeah. Oh, it's still.
And
Yeah,
th-
it's a foot in the door, and it's the underdog.
mhm.
You know.
they call them emerging markets,
Mm.
and I think it's really good for Apple because I know that Facebook has been trying to develop an operating system that runs on a phone because so many of those emerging markets, so many people in those emerging markets are consuming the internet through Facebook
Mm-hmm.
already,
Yeah.
and they're using basic phones or really slow smartphones to do that. And I know Facebook has been trying to find a way to get into there and say we want to be the way that people are consuming the internet, and for Apple to do that and bring really what is an advanced phone in any market to a market like that, that's really going to up the game in those areas, which is good for everybody because I mean, anytime you can just give a huge boost to technology in an area where it's not there, it helps everybody.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So, how do you guys feel about? I mean, and it might be changing because I'll confess I don't really track Android news that closely because I don't have one. Do you guys feel like the Android operating systems and stuff are fragmented? Does that cause a problem even amongst Samsung, like in terms of what model phone has what version of Android on it?
Um, yes, but it's getting better. Um, Google was pretty notorious when Android first came out. Well, I guess not Google specifically, but just the Android ecosystem was pretty notorious when it first came out for being, you'd have version 1 on this phone, version 2, 3 on this phone, version 4 on this phone, and it was kind of all over the place, and nobody could really decide, well, I want to get this phone, but maybe in a year when the next version of Android comes out, I might not get the updates if this phone isn't popular anymore.
Mm.
But they've been making huge steps to improve that. They're since 4.0, I believe, all of the upgrades have been more or less backwards compatible. So if you have 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich on your phone, chances are you can get the newer versions if your carrier decides to support it.
Hmm.
And that's where the main problem comes in is the carriers.
The
It
carrier,
takes them
yeah.
months to update the phones.
Yeah.
and I'll be honest, Verizon is the worst.
Oh
Like
yeah.
they are absolutely the worst at that.
That's
They
why I
will
rooted
lock
mine.
that down.
Yeah. Now, does that cause a lot of problems with, like mediocre users, like the people where it's their first smartphone and they don't understand why they can't get stuff, and it just does it clog the arteries,
What
so
I
to
see the
speak?
most is that it's really a brand issue for Google because
Mm.
people come in and ask for. I mean, Apple is honestly on the brink of being that that they're in the Xerox situation. People come in and say, "I want an iPhone." Okay, well here's our iPhone. Well, I don't like that one. What's this one all about? Well, that's not an iPhone. Like
Mm.
that's an Android, or that's and people honestly, we get a lot of people who come in and don't realize that the iPhone is a specific type of smartphone and not the smartphone. Like if all smartphones are iPhones to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and between the fact that they don't realize that separation and the fact that when you say, well, I heard there's a new droid out. Okay, there are literally 5 new droids sitting at my office right now, like that came out in the last month. So when you
Yeah.
say the new droid, it's really hard to narrow that down. I mean, legitimately, there are 3 new droids out, 4 new droids out, I guess. No, yeah, 3. The rest of them are all still just Android, um, which there's not that distinction that Google has come up with where there are droids and there are Android phones, and people don't understand the difference. And it's really just people don't, and that's what it comes down to, honestly, is people don't understand the difference in the terminology being used by Google,
Mm.
which I think, honestly, I mean, I love Google, but I think that's one of their biggest issues is they develop something and then they put it in beta, and it's
Yeah.
in beta for years.
Years, yeah. It was the
And
same
Yeah.
problem I mean, Jocelyn and I were just having a discussion the other day about Google Plus. It was fun when it first started, but it's stagnant.
it's such it's either a massively evolving beast that you have to be 100% on top of it to understand what's going on, or it doesn't change.
Mm.
And with Android, like he was saying at the beginning, a lot of people were kind of fractured over each version had a different version of Android. Google kind of had this. Here's Android, and then everybody jumped on it, and then next month, oh, here it is again, and then it was like, well, our hardware doesn't work with that. okay, we'll develop a new phone for it because it's going to change every day, and it does. It changes and changes and
Yeah.
changes. And not until in the last couple of years really have manufacturers got to the point where their hardware is to a point that they can sustain multiple versions of Android
Hmm.
Yeah.
over a year. Because I mean, we see 1 to 2 iterations of Android a year,
Yeah.
where we don't see that from Apple. Apple is kind of, you know, here it is in one piece,
Yeah,
and
and
it's going to stay like that.
that's what I get from Apple too is that the when the phones come out, when the iPad comes out, when those updates are coming, that WWDC in June usually brings a new operating system for the desktop. So I mean, like what to expect and when. And the thing about iPhones, or more specifically iOS in general, is that you know what you're getting into, and when you recommend it to a friend, you know what you're getting them into. Like you can say, you know, if you buy whichever iPhone you buy, you're gonna get iOS 7. Like that is
Hmm.
just that's just
Yeah.
the understanding. And I feel like there's been a lot of talk about Apple always playing catch up hardware wise, because of course they are. They're releasing a phone once a year when the industry releases a phone every other month,
Yeah.
and so they take some heat from that. But at the same time, I would rather have adequate hardware. Granted, iPhones are beautiful and they've got some nice stuff. I'm not bashing them, but I would rather have adequate hardware than what I feel, and this is just a personal impression, that Samsung and other Windows and app and Android phone companies are doing, is that they are trying to bait with shiny hardware. Like it's got the best camera and the biggest screen, and it does X, Y, Z, and this phone is bigger than your face, and all this stuff. But when people get it home, they're either on not the latest version of Android, or they are on the latest, but they don't get the new one when it comes out because of whatever carrier they're on, like you said. And there's all these hoops and hurdles that they just don't think of because they go in there thinking, I just want an iPhone, quote, smartphone. And then they walk out with an Android because it's bigger and shinier, than the latest iPhone. Especially when like before the iPhone 5 came out, where the iPhone was so small. You're dealing with that
Hmm.
3.5 inch screen.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is where it's just this overall kind of trend. I feel is that everybody's trying to catch Apple by trying to beat them out at something that they're not necessarily leading with. But the reason why I encourage my mother to get to get an iPhone, the reason why both my dad and his girlfriend have iPads, is because the system, iOS is just so damn reliable as far as a user experience goes for the average user.
Yeah, and on top of that, you can have zero experience with computers or any sort of technology. You could be Amish, walk in off the street, pick up an iPhone, and be like, "Oh, okay, I know how to use this."
Yeah, how do I make a call? You tap the one that looks like a telephone.
Yeah.
Like they are pretty simple. The one thing I always take away from new Apple phone and Apple iPad announcements is that Apple seems to be wanting to get into the case market. There's this huge third party market where everybody design cases, and Apple always seems to want to get in the game. The problem is Apple can design beautiful, beautiful hardware. They design the ugliest cases I have ever seen.
Didn't they?
Ever
Well, I
seen.
mean, if you want to play Connect 4, boom, it's right there on the back of your iPhone. It's ready to go.
Yeah, yeah. It's horrendous. And even their iPad case, like their iPad case, is this big rubber piece of garbage. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Why would I spend $60 to make my iPad a pound heavier and an inch bigger in every direction? Like I don't understand it. Like I have an iPad case that I love. It cost me $25 on Amazon. The back clips onto the iPad, and the front is a magnetic cover that does what it should, and it comes off. Like it's exactly what a smart cover does, and both of them together cost me $25.
Yeah.
Like I
Yep.
don't understand how Apple can't look at the stuff that's out there and just sure. I mean, Apple's going to charge $50 for it, but if you're going to charge $50, have it be a really nice engineered case that does what these $25 cases do. Like why is everything so ugly and cumbersome and rubber? Like it's like, hey, we've designed this beautiful aluminum and polycarbonate phone. We're gonna put it inside of a case that's a completely different color and looks awful.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It is kind of a weird disparity, isn't it?
it is. It's really strange. It's like, hey, we're gonna make this so shiny and so pretty, but you can't show anybody. Like, don't let anybody know you have it. You know,
Well,
it's really bizarre.
I'll tell you, one of the reasons I've never been on board with Apple on the cutting edge. Like when when the in the old days when they had like the colorful, like right after Jobs came back and they had the colorful PCs,
Hmm.
and even like with the Apple E2, which we had at our house for a while, and I just didn't like it,
Mm.
and I felt like Apple has always been this. It's always been Steve Jobs' mind,
Mm.
and people come into it and build what he thinks, and then they sell it. And he had always had this idea of, this is what I'm going to build. This to me looks absolutely beautiful and perfect, and then I'm going to give it to you, and you're going to like it. And if you don't like something about it, then don't get it. But this is what it's supposed to be. And if and I'm not necessarily on board with that. Like, he's very, or was very artistic, and things looked beautiful. And I don't know if you've seen the movie.
I haven't yet, but it's
Movie
on my
Jobs.
list.
I just watched it the other day, and absolutely fantastic. And it really gets down to this, the feel of who he was. And at one point, one of the guys says, "There's no sex in computing anymore," and they want to build a pretty basically that's a pretty computer. And I'm not necessarily the type that wants to look at it and say, oh, it looks really pretty. I want to see the inside of it. I want to know that it has the best hardware, and that and that it's going to perform at optimal at this unrealistic level, even if I'm not going to use it, just to know that it's there.
Hmm.
And that's not been the Apple motif. And so until they get to the point where they're like, where they did with like their MacBook Pro, where it's like, okay, we get that you want this functionality, but you also want the hardware to go along with it, so we'll give you that. Until they kind of come into that mindset where they're like, okay, this is what our consumers want. Now this is what we're going to give them. I don't know that they'll ever build an iPhone that to me is what I want, because they're on a different level. It's a very sleek and a very sexy looking phone, but I don't know, it's not what I wanted out of it, so it's not
Yeah.
going to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you,
mean,
you
that's
touched
a.
on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Joel.
I was just gonna say, Matt, you touched on something that I was getting ready to say. Is you and I are power users. Like,
Hmm.
we want to see. We build our own PCs. I break my computer about once a month and have to start all over from scratch just because I like toying with things. And Apple doesn't let you do that. You're locked into their ecosystem, and you use the hardware they give you, and that's that, which is cool. I mean, it's great for people. My dad loves his iPhone. Everybody in my family who has an iPhone love it, but they're not power users like we are.
Mm.
You know, they don't need to know that their processor is 64-bit and can run at 1,000,000 gigahertz per second. You know.
Yeah. See, I mean, like, and I would consider myself to be a specific power user in that, like the art that I do requires my computer to have some legs. But
Mhm.
Apple has long been a favorite of the design community because not only do they have an interface that is appealing to your workflow, and the apps and all that kind of stuff are usually engineered for creative endeavors, but they also put a lot of guts in there. Like, you don't like you also I don't want to think about it. Like, I mean, I work from home. I don't want to open up my computer and have it break, while I'm trying to work for a client, or have to fix
Yeah.
things or have it crash. I mean, like, no computer is perfect. I still have the, spitting beach ball of death from time to time with when I'm pushing Photoshop. But it happens a lot less than when I was on a PC, and
Yeah.
things would just shut down. There would be no warning. It'd be just like, nope, done. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
Yeah, that's the
that was,
thing. The
that was
Mac
fun.
Pros and the newer iMacs are extremely powerful, even for the lower end ones. I mean, the lower end ones are going to give the average user more power than they need. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're definitely right. Nowadays PCs are more geared towards people who either want
Yeah.
a really cheap computer or want to build it themselves.
Yeah,
There's
and that's
not
the
much
thing.
middle ground.
No,
except for
there isn't
gaming
much middle
PCs.
ground. Yeah, no, agreed. And I mean, I'm sure we can probably talk about PCs and phones and all that kind of stuff forever. But something that you mentioned, Matt, actually once is a nice segue into our movies, TV, and video section, and that is jobs. So you said it was good. Without spoiling anything, like what was so appealing about it? Is it the acting? Is it the story? Like what was the deal there?
Well, I've never. I guess that's to say that would have been a lie. I do like Ashton Kutcher as an actor when he does certain things,
Mm-hmm.
and he's always been a really funny guy. And he's I'm not necessarily a big fan of his comedy, but I, I've seen him do some other things and some things that he's into. When Dignation was still on with Alex Albrecht and Kevin Rose, he was really good friends with Kevin Rose and was on there a handful of times talking about the things that he's into. And he really gets like he gets who Steve Jobs was. Like that's someone he looked up to and knew a lot about him. And so to see him portray that character, I thought he did really well. I've heard some people say that they absolutely hated it because of the way that he portrayed Steve Jobs, but I feel like those people didn't realistically go into it knowing who Steve Jobs was,
Mm.
because I think a lot of people don't know who he was. They just see him as the guy that stood up at Apple presentations and said, "This is the new iPhone," and the crowd went wild, and then he got sick and passed away. And there's a lot of backstory to Steve Jobs. And I don't know how much of it you know.
I know a little bit only through kind of like tech reporting and that stuff. I haven't read the biography, but I am interested in at least giving it a shot. I'm Jobs is on my "we'll see before it leaves theaters" list. Like that's happening in the next couple of
Yeah.
weeks. So
And
yeah,
I,
don't
I
give away
think
too much.
I won't. I think that his portrayal of Steve Jobs was very compelling, and I think he does a really good job at letting you feel who he was when he was in this time in his life during that the creating of Apple and running it and all that
Hmm.
stuff, and where he came from, and where his passions lay, and all that stuff. um, the story kind of jumps around a little bit and was kind of difficult to follow at times. At least for me, I thought it was a little bit, but I also knew the story, so I could see where people would get confused by that if they didn't understand where the jumps came in.
Yeah, like if you haven't been, at least following some of the things that are happening in the tech world, then it might
Yeah.
be a little bit hard to follow depending on how they
Yeah.
put it together. I found that was a similar case in The Network,
Yes.
which is essentially the Facebook movie.
Yes.
But you know, I knew enough of where Facebook came from and the iterations it went through and that kind of stuff that I could kind of keep up. And I mean, I also go into this kind of stuff, even as like a tech enthusiast, with a grain of salt. Like, no one is ever going to be able to make a 100% pure, biography, because a lot of times, no matter how interesting the people are, if you keep everything to the letter of the truth, it's not going to make an interesting story that you can tell in 2.5 hours.
Exactly.
Right, like
Because if
you
it
have
was,
to.
everybody would already know it.
Yeah, I mean, like
You know?
you have to embellish, or you have to play up certain aspects of things. I'm not saying that you lie, but like there's certain types of endings or situations, or like I think, for example, in The Network, one of like his girlfriend or something at the time, there was drama there in the movie, and there wasn't in real life.
Yeah.
Like it just all
Yeah.
worked out. But that's not interesting. Like that's
No.
not appealing. You want the guy to struggle. You want him to see, you want him to have this kind of conflict. Because if he doesn't, then there's nothing that people can identify with.
Exactly.
And they just hate him because everything's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, so it just well, I'm glad that it's good, because I've been purposely avoiding reviews because I want to kind of go into it with a clean slate. But I'm glad I've had several friends who I trust, their kind of movie judgment recommend that it's something that I check out. Joel, what have you been watching over the last little while?
I've been watching a lot of Justified.
Nice.
Yeah, Scott Johnson got me hooked on it. He talked about it forever for a few months ago, so I started watching it. But what I wanted to talk about is the RoboCop trailer.
Oh, I did see this.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's if they did it right, which I'm hoping they did, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good reboot of that universe.
Yeah. Now, I always have a bit of a split kind of opinion on this kind of stuff. Like, would you rather see them move forward with the idea of robot cops? Sure. Like, let's run with that. Does it have to be a RoboCop movie? Like, do you get kind of not upset, but does it bother you a little bit at all that they're rehashing an existing character slash franchise just for the the cachet of it when they could be taking it in a completely different direction and not have to worry about where it came from?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like I
I
don't want
never
to
actually
see.
looked at it that way.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't like. Why not come up with it's something other like where there's a whole squad of cyborg cops, and have it be something else completely. Rather, why does it have to be like the same guy with the same, it's the retelling because
Yeah.
he's
Have
now.
you watched the trailer?
I have
Okay.
only the once though, and it was a little while ago. So I mean, did I
Okay.
miss something? Are they putting it? I mean, obviously they're putting a different spin on it, but it's
They
just like,
definitely are.
yeah, okay,
And for me, like at first I was like, oh man, I don't want them to. RoboCop was a pretty good movie back in its day, and they're gonna take a classic, you know, me being a kid watching a movie with my dad movie, and they're gonna redo it, and it's gonna be a different story, or it's gonna be the same story and it's gonna be crappy,
mm,
and I'm not gonna like that. And then I watched the trailer, and I realized that it is very much a different story, but it's I don't know. I like the spin they've put on it, and they took what I liked about the old RoboCop and the RoboCop himself and upgraded him to 2.0, and they're kind of telling a different story without I don't think they're going to ruin the original story. Now
yeah.
that is a 2.5 minute trailer, but
Mm.
so
It
I
looks like
guess
they start off with like the clunky looking RoboCop kind of homage to the original, and then they say, No, this isn't going to fly," and then they have
hmm
to upgrade them. Because I mean, of course,
yeah,
we do live in a world where visual effects are breathtaking these days,
yeah,
and
they're
you can
huge.
you can do all kinds of amazing stuff.
Yeah, the way I look at it is not so much as I mean, obviously they're cashing in on an older franchise that did really well and had a cult following, if not more than a cult following. And they're redoing it. They're expecting a lot of those past fans to come and pay them money, right? I mean, there's
Mm.
no way around that. That's part of their motivation. But I look at it more as a different interpretation on the story. Like you have the Dark Knight series as a different interpretation of Batman's
Yeah, that's true.
story.
That's true. I
You
mean,
know,
I suppose that I mean everybody was ready for the Nolan Batmans because Schumacher had made such a mockery of what were well received at the time. Tim Burton films.
yeah,
I
So
think
go ahead,
sorry,
Matt.
go ahead. Well, I was going to say I think too a lot of that has to do with um, to me my dad's generation had a lot of geeks and nerds who sat down and watched Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, and were like, "This is cool. I really like this." And then that generation in between me and him doesn't seem to have had quite the same grasp on it. Now that's not necessarily the truth across the board, obviously,
Hmm.
but at least like the people that I know closely to me aren't necessarily on the same wavelength as I would consider like my dad and I, as far as like Batman specifically, at least Batman movies. Like the old one was really cool, and the new ones are really cool, and the ones in the middle to me kind of seem like whatever.
Hmm.
But the generation, and it's weird because when you talk about it, like the generation that went to watch those Batman movies in the middle is a specific small group of people who are going to the theater, and they specifically tailored a film to them. And they do that with every group. So it's like this time around, we have a group of people who wanted to see Batman in that dark, violent, not killing people, but I think that this Joker was a really good representation against it to be a really violent and actiony film because that's what today's teenagers and young adults who are primarily going to watch these films wanted to see.
Yeah, well, it's a really good example of it is the Michael Bay Transformers films.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean, like I've
yeah,
never seen so much undergrad eye porn in my life.
Yeah, it
Like
was
it
such a
was explosions and ass shots on motorbikes. Like I mean,
it,
it really it made no attempts to hide it.
I feel like the only thing that could have made that more over the top is if each theater came with its own Michael Bay impersonator that stood up there and said, "Look at the screen, look at the screen, look explosions, look butt, look there's boobs." Like
Yeah,
that's the only thing that could have made that more over the top.
yeah. No, it really was an unfortunate take on a classic and nostalgic, loved franchise. And still something that's very popular with even that generation in between. Like my best friend Chad, who used to be on the show when we first started it, his younger brother is, I want to say 20, 21 maybe. And he is still a fan of Transformers, but not the 80s Transformers that I grew up watching. He's a fan of some of these other renditions that happened in between, where they kind of got popular again, and there was still Prime and there was still Megatron, but there was different versions and different takes, and they had multiple vehicle modes, and it was all very. I mean, it's all anime because that's how it all started, but it was very um, kind of manga influenced as far as a television show. So he has a very different place in his memory and heart for Transformers than, like, say, his older brother and I do. And I feel like there's some times where they do well with this kind of stuff, and other times it falls flat in its face. I mean, like this new Ninja Turtle movie, like, oh, just stop.
Oh, I'm so scared.
The first one that Jim Henson Company did back in the 80s or 90s was great. Just leave it. Just,
Yep.
I mean, and that went the way of the Batmans as well. I mean, like the first one was cool. The second and third one were garbage. They got really campy really fast. And
Yeah.
which is, it's such an easy hole to fall in when you're talking about giant mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, I mean, you're already out in a limb. you
Sure.
know?
Yeah.
But then like you really have to watch yourself with that kind of stuff. And I mean, I would even argue that, the first two Nolan Batmans are great, and the third one, while not a bad movie, wasn't spectacular.
I
I
agree.
agree.
It didn't live up to the other two.
No, it really took a dive in a direction that I was not expecting it to go.
I really liked Bane,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted there to be more Bane and his we need to cleanse society. I feel like if they'd have pushed that a lot harder and actually made it a much more gritty film, it would have been better. But there was this like underlying the whole way through the film. I just felt like I felt like from the beginning to the end, it was like, okay, we're gonna end it on this Batman, so just keep watching for the end. Okay, this one isn't it, but wait, it's coming. This is definitely the last Batman. And the whole way through the film, I'm just like, I really want to see more Bane and more Bane being total BA.
Mm-hmm.
But they just want to show me how Batman's gonna lose.
Yeah.
And and I don't necessarily want to. I feel like they artificially ended Batman because they wanted to, and not because it was a natural conclusion, which they could have done just fine. I feel like
Yeah. No.
without all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, speaking of superheroes, one of the cool things that I've been watching this week with the little bits of time that I have has been YouTube. And I caught a link on Twitter earlier. I'm pretty sure it was actually from Chinbeard, my friend Bill Duran from Punish Props, because he
Love
was
that guy.
yeah, he's so cool. He does some really cool prop work. So check him out on Facebook. I think is one of his preferred places. It's Punish Props on Facebook. Easy to find. He linked a Dragon Con 2013 epic cosplay video. It's only part one because the guy that makes these videos gets so much footage and puts it all together in kind of like a giant music video with like 3 or 4 songs. Plus, like, then there's a part 2 with even more stuff. And there's shots of the Dragon Con parade. There's shots of the con itself. There's shots of not so much panels, but it was mostly just capturing people in costumes. And for those of you that don't know, we missed talking about it last week because Dragon Con actually happens on the holiday weekend in September. And the costumes at Dragon Con are out of this world. I mean, it's one of the reasons why Bill goes, obviously, is because it's kind of like there's even like a big, prop making and costume making, contingent to these cons where people trade, advice and show off their latest creations and stuff. And some of these costumes are incredible. And what's even more important about this this video is that it is hilarious. Like, leave it to our wonderful worlds of nerds to put a Muppet in a stormtrooper costume with a lightsaber. Like, there's the people that are sticking very true to convention and making, very seriously portraying a character and cosplaying. And then there are people that are having a lot of fun. And I don't mean to say that the other people are not, but they're really going out of their way to make people laugh. and it's a really cool video to see people's takes on it. You've got like reversal. There was a couple. It looked like a boyfriend girlfriend. He was in the Princess Leia bikini, and she was dressed as Han Solo. Like
Nice.
it was all backwards. Very like just fun, clever stuff, just for shits and giggles. Like there's two guys that are either, I mean, they might not be military professionally, but they were dressed in military gear, and it was all camouflaged to match the hotel carpet.
Oh wow.
That is epic.
So when they got down on their belly to crawl across the convention room floor, they virtually disappeared.
That's awesome.
It was
That's
clever
pretty cool.
because it's held in the same hotel every year, right? Like just really forward-thinking, fun stuff. So I mean, if you haven't checked it out, the link will be in the show notes. But it's really cool. Just look up Dragon Con 2013 Epic Cosplay, and I'm sure you will find it. I'm gonna quickly grab the link here and share the user. His name is Beatdown Boogie. And this has already got like 19,000 views, so I'm pretty sure he's a regular at Dragon Con and does this kind of thing from year to year, so worth checking out. And there's some Batmans in there, there's some Banes in there. There's a lot of stuff that I don't recognize. It makes me feel old. Yeah, it makes me feel really old.
That's a lot of stuff that I don't recognize because I'm too young.
Yep, there's that. Oh, there's always that divide. Always that
Yep.
divide. Well, one of the other things that I've had the opportunity to do this week, speaking of comic characters and stuff, is last week I mentioned the Cyberforce 20th anniversary story arc, which I finished. I was only on issue 1 last Wednesday when we recorded. I quickly, over the weekend, devoured the other 4 to 5 issues, and they're all free on Comixology. And it's kind of a retake on the whole Cyberforce stuff, which was a comic that I grew up reading when I was about 14. Cyberforce has been kind of reimagined and also brought back in regular issues. So if you're interested, you can actually pick up new issues, I think for $1.99 on Comixology. But this particular arc was really fun. It's got some really unique artwork, and I mentioned last week that the story was not... Some of the visuals and some of the direction was a little bit odd in the first issue, but it quickly gets on track and becomes a very compelling story over the next 4 books. So I really encourage you to check it out, especially because it's free. One thing that happened, I think, in the last issue, whether the artist was getting tired or whether I really have to look it up to see whether they changed artists, but the art started to feel a little bit odd to me in the last issue. It's a very unique design and inking aesthetic, so it could have been just that. It's interesting to look at it from an artist's point of view because you're seeing a lot of detail and stuff like that people are not putting in because it's a small drawing or whatever, and it's really interesting to see what people can get away with, like not even drawing feet. Like sometimes people's shins just ended in a point, because they were running or it was a faraway shot or something. It's a unique kind of take on things. Everything has a real flow to it. So if you have not already, based on my recommendation last week, check out Cyberforce, the 20th anniversary arc on Comixology. So what have you been reading, Joel? Anything interesting? Are you still going down a dark road?
Yes, I'm about 4 or 5 chapters into the second book in the Dark Tower series. It's called The Drawing of the Three.
Okay.
I am getting extremely tripped out by this series. It is really messing with me.
In a good way? Or
Yes, in a good way.
Okay.
Definitely. The first book was awesome. The second book is also awesome so far, but it is completely different than what I was expecting. I mean, in the first 2 pages, most of my assumptions that I made from reading the first book were just tossed out the window. And I absolutely love stories like that. I love to be kept guessing because I can usually guess the ending to things, and I love it when something keeps me on my toes and keeps me thinking, oh, but wait, I thought, oh, no, that can't be true anymore. I just love that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Unfortunately, I can't give too many details because it's a very detail-oriented series.
Right. So,
So
yeah,
I
spoiler
can't.
free, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
I mean, it's an old series, but I know that you and Matt haven't read it yet, so I'm not going to spoil anything for you.
Yeah, and I mean, even after you were on last time, I was speaking with Jocelyn about it, and she has always meant to get back into it. And our friend Ralphie from the Frog Pants community also said, like, "Oh God, like you really have to check it out." So it's
Yeah.
on our kind of bucket list as far as books go. We're still struggling with trying to find the right location. Like, I mean, I like reading on the iPad as far as comics go. I don't necessarily like reading books on the iPad, but I can't say I've tried that hard either. And we also don't really have a nice spot to read at home. Like, there's the living room's got the TV in it. The natural light in the apartment is not great, with the exception of my studio, which is wonderful for working, but not for. I don't want to be in here relaxing, like
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's difficult to try to find a spot.
Yeah, I
Um,
have the same problem. I ended up just getting a library card. I think I mentioned last time I was
mm,
on. I got a library card, and I've just been checking them out for free because then I don't have to pay any money, obviously.
mm,
And I prefer having the physical copy anyway. There's just something about it. If I'm going to read a story that's longer
well,
than a few pages, I want to
yeah,
have, like, the actual physical paper in my hands,
it,
turn the pages, all that stuff.
it's nice to unplug too.
Yeah.
But even then, like even with the physical book from the library, like we'd still be. It's so sad to say, like it's hard to wedge in the time to read.
Oh, I understand. I've been reading mostly on my lunch hour at work. That's about
Yeah,
the only time that I've been able. Well, that's about the only time that I've wanted to fit it in. Because when I'm at home, I'm playing games with people.
yeah. See, and that's when I used to read, was when I was working outside of the home. Lunch
Yeah.
break, taking an hour after work and stopping in a cafe on the way home, something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Right on. Well, I think unfortunately because of the time limitation this week, we're going to have to wrap things up. But thanks for coming on, guys. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. And has there been any workings in the aforementioned podcast?
Not since last we spoke,
Okay.
unfortunately.
So it's still
Yeah.
coming. People can still
Yep.
wait with bated breath for the epic launch of the Matt and Joel something.
Yeah.
It
Go
will
ahead.
be the greatest podcast you have ever heard.
Oh shoot!
No
Now you set the
pressure.
bar so high.
How's
pressure.
that? Is that
No
is
pressure.
that Steve Jobs enough for
Yeah,
it?
there you go. Yeah.
It will
Yeah.
be the greatest podcast you've
I will
ever
try
heard.
not to take offense, given that you are currently on a podcast right now.
Well, I said the podcast with us on it would be the greatest podcast ever heard. I didn't necessarily say it was one with only us on it.
Ah, I
So
see. I see.
one
I
could
see.
say that this is in fact the greatest episode of all time.
Dude, what a fantastic save.
Oh,
was
shucks. Yeah,
awesome.
that was nice. Dude, very, very, very clever.
Yeah, we'll get something out eventually. We've both been pretty busy lately, which of course is everybody's excuse, but
Well,
we'll
you know
get
what,
there
dude? I
eventually.
mean, life gets in the way, work gets in the way. Things like these kinds of projects happen, I think, when the time is right, and you don't want
Yeah.
to force them, because then you shoot out an episode that might be great, but then you're months, before you get
Yeah.
another one out there. And
Yeah.
once you kind of know where you can go with things, that's when you can start to move forward with it. So.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing too where it's going to take us forever to prep and things like that until we get into the swing of things. And then once we're used to it, it'll just be like, "Hey, you ready for a show? Yeah, okay, click, let's record, let's go."
Yeah,
Boom.
yeah,
you know?
it does, and it comes together rather quickly, especially if you can start doing it on a regular basis. We missed a few weeks here and there on the Citadel Cafe due to Peyton having a 3-year-old, or
That'll do
the schedule
do it.
conflicts, that kind of thing. But in the grand scheme of things, we've been able to do it fairly regularly, and that gets you into the game really quickly. You start to feel comfortable faster than you would think.
Yeah.
Like within the first, half dozen shows, a couple of months of doing it, every week, and you guys will be on your feet in no time. And I'm looking forward to it because, as I hope our listeners have, it's been a fun time talking with you guys tonight, especially, and I really appreciate the last minute, I guess, serendipity of having Matt join us because of the whole Apple News cell phone stuff. It was nice not to have a bunch of Apple fanboys on the show, and actually have some critical thinking about what's going on in the cell phone market, because I know nothing of Android, so it was nice to have all that kind of stuff there. So, but that's it. That's the end of the show. For those of you who normally tune in on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, that is when we normally record the live episode of the Citadel Cafe. The music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and of course, the podcast is available on demand via iTunes and our website, thecitadelcafe.com. That is where you can find the show notes for this and other episodes. You can also find us on YouTube. It's a new thing that I've been doing where I just take a title card and throw up the audio for the show. So if you prefer to get your music and podcasts and entertainment from YouTube, you can find us there. It's just my name on YouTube, Joel Duggan. Easy to find, easy to consume. You can contact the show at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com or find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Google Plus with just The Citadel Cafe as the username. Speaking of other podcasts, don't forget to check out the Gamers In podcast every Friday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on amove.tv. If you're a gamer, you can tune in to Jocelyn and Ryan as they break down their opinions on the latest gaming news and what they've been playing. Visit gamersinpodcast.com or amove.tv/TGI for details. And I am actually going to be on AMove TV tomorrow night, which is the whole reason why we are recording early. I'm going to be joining my friends Kyle and Brockett on Biggest Fan. It is Canadian Week on Biggest Fan, and we will be checking out what's new in the land of being a fan of Canadians on amove.tv/ if I only had the internet at my fingertips, Biggest Fan. And that records at 7 p.m. Eastern. They also stream live on amove.tv. So it's going to be a blast. Kyle and Brockett are hilarious fellows and good podcasting friends of mine. I'm looking forward to it. I actually have been out of touch with them this summer. Everybody's been pretty busy, so it's going to be a rockin' good time. As I mentioned at the top of the show, my name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything I am up to on joelduggan.com, including my book, Starcross Volume 1, which is available in my web store. Joel, where can people find you online?
Right now, it's just my Twitter, at Robot, ROBUT.
Again, I reiterate, you bastard. The handy little Twitter name.
True.
Yeah. Matt, what about you? Where can people find you online?
I am on Twitter at the Matt Britton, all one word. And that's pretty much it right now.
Cool. Well, I will keep everybody posted as to when you guys decide to launch your new podcast that shall remain nameless because it has not yet been named. It's that new. It's just fresh and shiny and hasn't even been realized yet. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two. Speaking of the chat room, though, I do want to try to find some other people that I've seen in the chat room on a regular basis and get them back on the show. Molly, TCC fan, is a regular, and she was a hoot when we had her on.
Cool.
It was fun. It's funny because I try to get more female guests, and no one seems to be available. Everybody's busy.
It seems like girls don't do podcasting as much either, just for whatever reason.
Yeah,
not trying to discriminate or anything.
No,
it just
no.
seems that way.
No, you're right. There are certainly more guys out there doing it than girls, but I would argue that I have heard more quality shows from girls.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's
Like,
a fair assessment.
I feel like there.
I don't listen to very many podcasts that are hosted by girls that I'm like, that wasn't that good of a podcast.
Yeah,
But,
they tend to
They
rise
always
to
seem
the
to be
top.
of good quality.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
at least
listening. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, at least decent personalities
Mm-hmm.
that are out there doing it, so that
Yeah.
you're like, this is really, even if the subject isn't necessarily, exactly what I was looking for, like, their personality really draws you in.